Somehow, Disney have done the impossible. They've made Star Wars not a movie franchise anymore. It's been years upon years since they've actually produced a movie. They've announced a lot of movies, but none of them have really come to bear. You know, The Last Jedi just really put a disgusting taste in a lot of Star Wars fans' mouth. The Rise of Skywalker didn't make it any better. People were very ambivalent, it felt like, to Solo, and they just been sitting there waiting for a movie to actually make. It sounded like they were going to make New Jedi Order. It sounds like we'll probably get that Mandalorian and Grogu movie first. But really, if they want to get Star Wars back on track, they're going to have to do another trilogy, somehow separating the Star Wars universe and the legacy and the story that they're telling away from the J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy monstrosity known as the sequel trilogy. And we've got news that, in fact, a new trilogy is coming, but I think they're going about it all wrong. And I do believe you guys will agree with me. And it turns out there's one linchpin in all of this. And apparently, this character has been the linchpin to every single movie that Kathleen Kennedy has tried to make over the last 5 years. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's get right to it. Deadline broke the news that Simon Kinberg, co-creator of Star Wars Rebels, is developing a new Star Wars trilogy for Lucasfilm. The report itself is full of mixed messaging, with the outlet saying they heard the trilogy was episodes 10 to 12, but that other sources denied that. Though one thing was clear, that the trilogy is not part of the Skywalker saga, episodes 1 through 9. The Hollywood Reporter followed up, confirming that Kinberg is writing a Star Wars trilogy, that the trilogy is not part of the Skywalker saga, but they believe the trilogy is also not episodes 10 to 12. However, they did mention the trilogy will focus on a new story and new characters, but some familiar faces from the Skywalker saga could pop up in the films. It was tough getting through that Deadline article. It almost didn't make sense at points. It's going to be episodes 10, 11, and 12, but it's not going to be part of the Skywalker saga. They're like, well, okay, why is it episodes 10, 11, and 12 at that point? There's a lot of mixed messages going out there, but it's clear that Simon Kinberg has been brought on board. He has a history with Star Wars, at least, and he does have some success, certainly producing and writing movies in the past. And they are finally laying out the blueprint for a Star Wars trilogy, a new trilogy, and we'll see how that all ends up being. And I think this is probably a good idea, that they actually have one voice that's going to come in here and write the movies, produce the entire trilogy, and have one creative vision no matter who the director is. Does that sound like anything that we've seen in the Star Wars history? The original trilogy, George Lucas wrote all of them. He produced all of them. He did not direct all of them. But because you had one outstanding voice and vision involved with it, you were able to keep the story on track and even make some changes here and there. But in the end, it worked out perfect, and it's probably the greatest trilogy of all times. Although I hear you if you think, I guess, Indiana Jones maybe was a better trilogy. There's a few of them out there that people will talk about. Certainly Lord of the Rings. I still think Star Wars is the greatest trilogy out there, and one creative voice behind that is going to be a good idea. Is Simon Kinberg the right voice? Not really sure about that, but it's certainly a better voice than Rian Johnson. And I would certainly say he's a better choice than J.J. Abrams, who was certainly hot at the time, but the luster is worn off. You know, his reinterpretation of Star Trek, not exactly great. Not the worst thing ever. We got the worst thing ever on Paramount Plus, but not great either. His beginning chapter of the new Star Wars trilogy, the sequel trilogy, was just A New Hope all over again. Unfortunately, he didn't write the second movie. They let Rian Johnson do it. He didn't like anything that J.J. Abrams did. He changed all of it, and then J.J. had to come back for the third movie and try to undo all the changes that Rian made and then get to an ending that was very, very fast. It was like watching a movie on meth. It was like watching The Rise of Skywalker. I reviewed it right here on the channel with Aaron Sparrow. That was an experience. Now, speaking of Kinberg, he does have, a pedigree when it comes to movies. Kinberg previously worked with Lucasfilm in co-creating with Dave Filoni and Carrie Beck the Emmy-nominated animated series Star Wars Rebels. That ran for 4 seasons from 2014 to 2018. He was also a consultant on Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, the J.J. Abrams directed film that revived the franchise in 2015. He has also been heavily involved in other franchises as writer and or producer That includes a decade spent on the X-Men films and the Logan spinoff film that starred Hugh Jackman and was directed by James Mangold. He was also producer of the first 2 Deadpool films and executive producer for the 2024 blockbuster Deadpool and Wolverine. And you could see why Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm and Disney would feel comfortable with Mr. Kinberg. Has a relationship with Dave Filoni, who's the chief creative officer over all of Lucasfilm, co-created Rebels with him, was a consultant on the Star Wars movie that made the most money for Disney, The Force Awakens, but also was the executive producer of Deadpool and Wolverine, had also produced the previous 2 films, and had produced a couple of the good X-Men movies. But he also helped produce some of the worst X-Men movies of all time. I believe he was a part of the Dark Phoenix saga, which was... let's forget that movie happened. Let's put it that way. We don't want to get into that because that is a diversion that will take us 10 minutes trying to walk our way through that one. So Kinberg at least has success, knows how to write, not always successful, but is successful enough that you can probably put him in charge of a new trilogy, and it's not the worst idea ever. In fact, I would say taking somebody with actual pedigree that knows what they're doing and putting them in charge of all 3 of them is probably the smartest move that Kathleen Kennedy has made as Lucasfilm president. The idea that Rian Johnson would just finish up what JJ did and they were going to go to, I'm forgetting the name of the dude that was supposed to do the 3rd movie in the trilogy, but he had all these plans and Rian Johnson ruined them all because you had too many creative ideas, too many creative people working in different directions. You want everybody moving in the same way. So is this good news? It's better news. It's better news than New Jedi Order. Sounds better than Mandalorian and Grogu. A movie, if they were going to make it, they probably should have done it, I don't know, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe when Mandalorian was hot. So we'll see how this goes, but they have a better blueprint. And I will acknowledge that, even though I think there is going to be something that turns a lot of people off. Movie insider Jeff Snyder shared details that he heard via his newsletter. Snyder claims the Kinberg trilogy will be positioned as episodes 10, 11, and 12. The trilogy would focus on new characters and a new story. The one thing that everyone can agree on, and that the familiar face is that of Rey Skywalker. Snyder revealed that he heard Daisy Ridley is slated to appear in the Kinberg trilogy as Rey Skywalker, and that Rey will be positioned as the Obi-Wan of the new trilogy. And when you hear a statement like that, it lets me know 100% without fail, Kathleen Kennedy did not watch The Rise of Skywalker in theater with actual Star Wars fans. Because as soon as she claims that she is Rey Skywalker, the entire fucking audience in unison, all the way around the world, groaned and said, please, Lord, don't do that. She is not Rey Skywalker, and this has nothing to do with Daisy Ridley. Seems like a lovely person. You know, I don't think that she deserves the ridicule and scorn she likely received, if not directly, indirectly, because she is Rey in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. It had nothing to do with her performance. It had everything to do with the writing. It had everything to do with the direction. It had everything to do with the lack of awareness of what the Force is, how that stuff works, and the way the character was portrayed, not by the actual acting, but the way that they wrote her. She was the personification of why Mary Sues suck in movies, why no one likes them. And we've received an abundance of Mary Sues over the past few years, and they never work out. If you want this new trilogy to be successful, I would not be featuring Rey in any way, shape, or form, especially not calling her Rey Skywalker and having her be the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the movie. Let's just say she does not have the it factor of an Alec Guinness or even a Ewan McGregor to carry a role like that, and people already despise her, not personally the character that she plays, and any appearance by that character in a movie is already gonna make it not worth seeing, because nobody wants to see Star Wars ever attached to what J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy were able to squeeze out of their rectums and put up onto a movie theater. It absolutely sucked. No one likes to see it. At least Star Wars fans don't. And if you want this to be ultra popular, ultra successful, and if you want to kick off a new age of Star Wars, that is the dumbest fucking idea I've ever heard in my life. But it's not the first time we've heard this idea. She's supposed to have her own Rey movie, and we've got some updates on that too. Where does this leave New Jedi Order? Snyder says Lucasfilm found a new writer for the project following Stephen Knight's exit, but he doesn't know who that is at the time. Despite a new writer being hired, Snyder speculated whether or not Obi-Wan New Jedi Order would come to fruition, given that the Rey character plays a similar role in both projects. He also mentions an older Rey is rumored to feature in Sean Levy's untitled Star Wars movie, which is quite funny considering the original New Jedi Order writer Damon Lindelof initially had an elderly Rey in his script, which was ultimately tossed out for a script from Stephen Knight that featured a younger Rey. So there we go. 3 or 4 projects in development from Kathleen Kennedy, all featuring one character, Rey, played by Daisy Ridley. No offense to Daisy Ridley. Seemed like a great person. Nothing wrong with her. No one likes that character. But does it seem coincidental that maybe Damon Lindelof and Stephen Knight and Sean Levy and Simon Kinberg would all come up with the exact same concept? I don't think so. These are creative people. They're supposed to be coming up with new ideas. It's clear that it is being mandated by Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, that we will make Rey work. We will make her a thing. She will be just as big as Luke Skywalker. She will be just as beloved as Han Solo and Obi-Wan Kenobi, or I will die fucking trying. And that's clearly what they're doing here. How many of these stupid Rey projects can you even conceive of before you kind of finally admit defeat? This isn't working. Disney Star Wars never took off. We've killed merchandise sales. The box office went down and down and down, including the first ever Star Wars movie to lose money. And I believe that includes the Clone Wars animated film that was truly atrocious. Solo actually lost money for Disney. Star Wars is a brand in a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. It's not doing well. And Rey, despite Daisy Ridley being a great person, is one of the major reasons why nobody likes the character. But it's clear that this is coming from on high. Kathleen Kennedy will not retire. She will not leave Lucasfilm until she believes Rey is a fucking thing. And that shit is never going to happen. She's going to literally die trying to make this character happen. So the good news is they've got an architect. They're going to have a blueprint. They're going to have one creative voice overseeing everything. Great idea. The bad news is Rey is going to be a fucking focal point. Something that nobody wants to see. And so the good and the bad of the new Star Wars trilogy in development from Lucasfilm, sometimes it can get better, but it can always get worse. If you appreciate this and what we're doing right here on Think Critical YouTube, I do appreciate that and hope you would like to support us. To do that, you come visit me on Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. Got lots of tiers, different podcasts that you can enjoy on Spotify and your other media players out there, including exclusive video, stuff like that. If you haven't checked out, I hope to see you there very soon on Think Critical Patreon.